one of the most disgusting, one of the most divisive pieces of legislation that will hit suburbia in this state and certainly in this city that I've ever encountered in my life.
I see an attempt to wipe out all the trees. I've been writing to the Minister Stuart Ayres saying we are getting an enormous backlash about this legislation. It overdoes it. In Victoria, where they brought in somewhat similar legislation a couple of years ago, I think it was, a whole lot of areas around Melbourne were exempted, areas with lots of trees. So why couldn't they have done that for Sydney?
Let me first say that I'm very excited to be in a room where there are more lovers of trees than in any room I've ever been in, and I say that as a green.
Both the Beecroft Alliance, Beecroft Cheltenham Alliance people and the Trust have been fighting very, very hard.
I want to explain to you tonight how we're being screwed, seriously, and how those who are responsible are not facing up to the issue. When I heard the legislation was coming through, and it came through 2GB's newsroom, I thought, well, that can't be true. That's just so left of field that it's illogical and it won't work. And obviously no government would even contemplate bringing in such legislation. Well, not only was I wrong, but in fact the legislation had virtually been ticked off. It hadn't been checked, to my knowledge, by the New South Wales government legal system.
There is a review. The government has also called a review of this legislation after only being in operation for just over a month.
And then gave me the most unbelievable quote. You're the first person that I've heard and the minister's heard who doesn't like this legislation. Everybody loves it. And I said, well, you and the minister have been in a box somewhere and haven't talked to the general public.
Influx of birds who have been driven out of Cheltenham because the trees have been cut down. Their habitats have been denied them. And so they moved up to Beecroft, which is one of the few public parks that are left in Beecroft. And we're now seeing dead animals where you have birds who are nesting. And they're very territorial. They're very fussy about their babies. And they will kill anybody who comes into their particular territory. And so we are seeing it, but these are sort of the social things that we
also rescue wildlife. I'm a wildlife rescuer, and I have had an unprecedented amount of calls just in this area, because
I don't think I've seen 1 millimetre of movement to our benefit in this community of this current government with that issue. I think the audacity of the previous Premier, the current Premier, the Minister for Transport, who is reflected in this marvellous glow of the opal thing, but refuses to discuss the issue of coal pollution. Can I give you some information? We lost over 30,000 trees, well over 30,000 trees, and still counting. It'll end up at close to 35 to 36,000 trees by the time they're finished putting in the rail line. They have agreed to put back the suggested balance of species that I've put to them on your behalf. One of the real problems, though, is that in the 1800s, when the line ran through, they put the line was carved through the suburb, and the trees were left on the side. In 2014, you can't have that. That actually leaves no room for trees. Now, I've walked a lot of this area because I'm now being asked to assist the ETTT to put the trees back. We've got council growing some of the species of trees that I've requested, and they're growing them at their nursery. We're having a devil of a job to find safe areas back from the line before they end up in people's bedrooms. So there's not going to be very much space to put back the trees that we are really desperately trying to return.
An enormous increase in the amount of rescues. And I'm concerned about not just the trees, which is obviously a concern, but also for the undergrowth, which is a protection for some of the smaller animals and things like that. But people think that undergrowth is, you can clear it, will save the trees. But we have it coming up from the gully behind us in Walton Road. I've got echidnas coming up. I've got lots of very small birds that would not have any environment in which to live. So what is really concerning me is that that is meant to be an environmentally sensitive zone.
Say that on Monday of this week I was standing on Epping Station and I counted dozens of trucks going through Epping and to what is now a very large urbanised corridor, all of which were carrying uncovered coal to the transport of coal from the Hunter to the port of Newcastle. And the researching...
Let's continue on that line of the pollution and the noise from the trains. If, for instance, I go up to Beecroft station and I'm caught having a cigarette, I can be fined around $250 for having a cigarette on the platform of the station. Yet each one of the diesels that carry the freight trains through Sydney, at the moment, each diesel engine produces the equivalent of pollution of 140 trucks.
What I have through a local Beecroft resident is an aerial shot of the NWRL service facility of Castle Howard Road. It is unbelievable.
Yep.
It is 2.5 acres denuded. Forget the temporary sealed road.
For that for so long and got screwed.
The original EIS on this development stated that this would be a ventilation unit, similar to that of Beta Game Drive, which some of you may remember down in Lake Cove National Park. The difference with this facility is, compared to Lady Game, it sits right on the back fences of all the people who live down there. It's probably going to have 24/7 lighting. God knows how much noise, but this is the doozy. When a spokesperson from the NWRL project team told a caller 2 weeks ago that they don't have any plans yet for the above ground facility. Work is anticipated to begin on this in 2017 and it will take up to 30 to 36 months. I think this story should be read by all you people and do what Joe says. Start belting your feet on the pavement until you get some answers to what is going to go there.
Well, I'm afraid the other trees are quickly disappearing. The arborist report actually said the tree which has a canopy of 22 metres. 22 metres. Actually, they said 19. I measured it that day, it was 22 metres. They said it wasn't a real problem because, quote, exact quote, it could not be seen from Beecroft Road. That's the sort of ignorance that we are working with and somehow trying to get through to protect
your minister, that I find that disgusting. Personally, I haven't appointed, and no one else has actually elected anyone from the RFS, and the minister should stand up if he thinks the legislation is that good. So I'm not talking about the Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains is a quite separate case. What I'm talking about are the suburbs of Sydney that have suddenly been turned into red zones because the RFS wants to increase its bureaucracy. When I made that point, and by this stage I was getting the most vicious emails that I have ever received in my public life in 34 years. I was called a suicide bomber and no better. I was called the lowest of the low, a dog. The emails that I received were so distressing to my staff that I instructed that they no longer read them. I spoke to other presenters at 2GB, some of whom very likely deserved the odd nasty email. but they indicated they had never heard anything quite like that before. I've kept them all. He refused to front the public on the radio. He refused. And then deflected the responsibility of this legislation, the first time it had been discussed on public radio in this city, to the Fire Commissioner.